layout while we.
Okay, we're recording.
All right. Brian, you got a pen? Don't know if I did with that.
So I suspect we've begun, and I guess we're on the record now. If anyone wishes to, we have an agenda in front of us. We everybody's had an opportunity to review it. Is there anything that needs to be added? Do we need to agree on this agenda? Anything else that needs to be added today?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't have
It is not in the packet.
It's not in the packet, but it was sent out.
It was.
that.
I think that we need to add to the agenda.
Yeah, I have some recommendations as well.
We can change number 4, adjournment, number 4 for barrier or other business.
Okay.
And then number 5 would be adjournment and more than 4 if time permits. And so any new business can come up under there. If we can take an opportunity to go around and introduce ourselves, just a brief introduction. Starting with Alderman Gray.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see everybody this afternoon. I'm Jeffrey Boyd, for the 22nd Ward here in the city of St. Louis and Vice Chairman of the Public Safety Committee.
Dolphus Pruitt, St. Louis, and Louis. Joe Carroll, Alderman, 23rd Ward, Chairman of the Public Safety Committee.
Jamila Nasheed, resident of the city of St. Louis, former state senator.
Reverend Charles Norris, pastor of St. James AME Church, also pastor of the St. Louis Metropolitan Clergy Coalition, and the chair of the steering committee for pure violence.
I'm Pam Walker. I'm a public health executive and have experience state level running the Division of Environmental Health and Communicable Disease Prevention. I also served about 9 years as St. Louis City Health Director.
Reverend Darrell Gray, I am the chair of the Social Justice Commission, president of Michigan Baptist Convention, and civic engagement chairperson for the Baptist Ministers Union for St. Louis and the city. Today, I'm chairing the task force. We do have another member. If you would introduce yourself, he's meeting with us by way of Zoom.
Hi, my name is Brad Hopp. I'm the consultant of the group. I'm on Zoom obviously today because I live in the state of Wisconsin. Hopefully you can hear me.
We hear you fine, Brad. And we do have a staff person assigned to the task force. And you want to introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Champion, and I'm here just to assist and facilitate with getting things that you guys need.
Thank you very much. Organization of task force, within our packet, we do have the announcement from Mayor Cruzen announcing the initial framework for the new corrections task force. For the sake of those who are tuning in as part of this meeting, I will read it. Mayor Lyda Cruzen announced that she is asking the new corrections task force to begin to understand and review the following 3 urgent topics relating to the City Justice Center, CJC. Number 1, to investigate the alleged concerns and complaints regarding food, water, temperature, and clothing. 2, the need to begin moving cases through the 22nd Judicial Circuit and other measures possible to address the isolation and uncertainty resulting from the halting of court cases for nearly 1 year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. 3, to become apprised of the urgent building and equipment needs of the facility, which is approximately 20 years old. We do understand that last evening, former Missouri Supreme Court Justice Mike Wolf informed the mayor that he would have to step back from serving on the task force at this time. His reasons are stated. The mayor has indicated her appreciation. I have been elected to chair the task force, and obviously I accept it and appreciate the opportunity to serve. We'll continue with the organization. There were questions that were raised, I think, before. Do we want to talk about the organizational structure, scope of the task force, or do we want to hear from Commissioner Glass and then maybe have that discussion? Does the task force have?
Let's hear from Commissioner Glass before we move forward.
If I may, I would like to just go through these packets, these informational packets, just let you know what's in them. Just from an informational point of view, since so you've been sent a lot of things recently. There is more information included in the packet. So
That's Commissioner.
So on first page, it is Mayor Christmas statement. The next few pages are recommendations for members of the task force on how to proceed. The first tab contains detainee information from the city website and graphic tool. The second tab is the corrections, medical, and COVID protocols in full. The third tab is the medical and food service contracts. The fourth tab consists of the various food menus that corrections provides. The fifth tab is temperature readouts from the third, fourth, and fifth floors of the Justice Center from the dates, I believe it's 2/4 all the way through to 2/9. The sixth tab is detainee demands and complaints, as seen on various social media web pages from detainee advocate groups. The seventh tab is just a number of media stories, recent news articles, so on and so forth, dating back to mid-December. The eighth tab briefly discusses two recent injuries that occurred at CJC. The ninth tab is statements from elected officials. And the 10th and final tab are a CJC assessment, a supplement, and an MSI assessment, all prepared by Brad Hump, who is on the Zoom call part of the task force. So I just wanted to provide that for you and let you know that that's what's in the packet. And again, I'm here to help. So if you need more.
And also in that packet that I provided, there should be a document for discussion on a possible process and how we move forward.
Yes, that is in the first, I think the third page is where that begins.
And that's simply for discussion, obviously not a dictation, but just as I was thinking about it, a possible way where we could get a starting point for your consideration.
That is all that I have to say. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dale Glass. I am Commissioner for Division of Corrections. And I thought I'd start simply by giving you a little bit about who I am and how I came to be here, and might help inform my approach to criminal justice and criminal facility. The first time I started working in law enforcement, or at least my interest, was when I was in high school. I was a junior police officer, did things like crowd control and things of that nature for the little local town. And I also became civil defense certified. That probably dates me, because we haven't used that term in a long time, but that's where I began. Then I served 8 years in the military, returned to my hometown, and then went to work for the Missouri Department of Corrections. I worked there starting in, I think it was 2000. Well, I was there for 28 years. So when I began working there in the early 80s, I started off as a correctional officer, CO1, guard in the unit. I worked for parole both in the jail and in the field. I was a precinct investigator for the for a period of time. Also worked for the parole board, doing institutional parole hearings, determining release dates, things like that. I retired from there as a deputy warden in 2009. And then in 2012, the city of St. Louis reached out to me for a provisional appointment for 6 months. And so now we're approaching 9 years, and I've been here ever since in this position. What my approach has been that of the re-entry process. As a matter of fact, my staff that worked for me in Missouri Department of Corrections introduced a pilot program to the Missouri Department of Corrections for re-entry. When I came here to St. Louis in 2012, I embarked on a grant with the help of the then public safety director and also state probation parole to try to get a grant for our jail for re-entry. We were not awarded that grant, but I proceeded to use that process because I was quite familiar with it. And basically that process indicates that we engage volunteers, various drug programs. We probably work with almost every university in the St. Louis area, partnership with them. And even with the law school, having classes about the law with the detainees. So that's the kind of approach we had. We also partnership with the community. So when people were released, they could continue those services. In fact, I think we were probably one of the first ones in the country that added to that process the occupational therapist. We had a full-time occupational therapist in the jail and a part-time one in the community to make those connections. So that's how we approach supervising and running the jail. And I will tell you that we've never had any events like the last 3 this whole time I've been here. From time to time on occasion, we'll have someone act out and we have to address it, but never in large groups or in mass like that. In fact, I thought that the relationship based on how we interact with the detainees was a pretty good one that you would expect from those two diverse groups. And I know that there's been a lot said about what we do or don't do, but I insist and require that people are treated for me. That is who I am. That's what I do. The events leading up to here, and I'm sure I have some idea of what I think led to this event, and I'm sure that you guys will do a deep dive into that issue and see what you come.
But can you elaborate on what you feel
Yes,
led up to this event here?
Yes, I'm glad to. I think there are a couple of things in play. The first thing that I would indicate is that one, St. Louis Police and the U.S. Marshals have really been honing in on the ones that have been people that have been causing a lot of trouble in our community. So I think we have a significant number of those people that you will find are probably known in the community as being problematic. So that was one issue. And I even talked to my staff about, look, guys, we've got to make sure we do the basics. All the rules that I taught you about how we need to conduct ourselves, how we position ourselves in the jail, how we check doors and all of that. So that was one issue that I noted and we tried to address. The next thing is that when COVID came about, it presented some issues for us. One, that you hear a lot, and it's true, visiting. They weren't able to visit their families face to face. Although some places you don't visit face to face. But when you take something away that they have, there is a reaction to that. And this has been going on since March. And so it's a major issue. We have been trying to get video visitation, and that has been, the contract has been approved and signed by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, but the contract hasn't been fully enforced. So that's stalled. And because of the COVID protocols, we are not able to allow visits at this time. Right in the, around, I think it was October or so, we talked to the health department, we were going to try to reinitiate it. And then we, it was later in the year, but then we had another surge. So we said, no, we better wait. And so that became problematic. And when we talked to the detainees, we have ring rep meetings. That's always on the agenda, and we have never done anything about it. I don't think we can fix it. The other one was about the tablets. That's always on the agenda, and we just don't have them yet. And probably added to the issue was that we ran a pilot program that fell through, but we still have a few tablets. And so now it becomes an issue like who has the tablet and I want to use it, it's not fixed. So that created problems for us. Those are the two major things. And the other thing is the length of stay. So prior to COVID, the length of, and we have a dashboard that you can look at that at any time and check at various times what the average length of stay was for the detainees. In St. Louis, I think the average length of stay is kind of long anyway, to begin with, prior to COVID. It was about 240 something days approximately of length of stay for a person. And now with COVID, we're at 340. So one of the issues in any jail or prison setting is having a situation where you're uncertain what your fate's going to be. When's my next court date? You know, I don't know what they're going to do to me. I might go to prison, I might go home, but I want to know. And that became, I think, a real prevalent concern. And I will add, just go in, I had intended to mention it, but one of the things that they do is they see what's going on in the communities. And one of the things across the country, I noticed, and it happened here as well, is the detainees were like, well, we're probably going to be getting out soon, but then it didn't come. And so those are the kind of things that I see contributing to the issue.
You mean getting out as it relates to COVID?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes. They felt because of COVID, they would be released. And we saw several, a number of people being released. And I'm of the opinion that right now, the number of people we have is as far as the courts are currently going to go. In other words, they think these people need to be here.
Can you give us an update on the status of the locks? Surely that was a problem. The fact that, we had locks that were, that detainees can jack and get out of. Where are we with the locks, and what is being done as a result of what we had with the outbreak?
So we made contact with through BPS, Board of Public Service, to assist us. And we have a company that we have contracted with to develop the fix for that. And we're in the process.
How long would that take?
I'm not sure how long the whole project will take, but these kind of locking mechanisms is not something that's on the shelf.
So right now, the locks are not fixed right now today.
That is correct.
And you don't know how long it would take for those locks to be functional.
Not completely.
So
I
the
know
same thing
that-
that happened a week ago can happen again because the locks are not fixed.
It is possible. I know that our lead waiting time of getting our first group of locks is probably another couple of weeks away. And so, as you might imagine, it has us on pins and needles trying to make sure that everybody is safe. Yes,
So there is no way that you can speed the process up?
no,
Why not?
because that's how long it takes to develop, make, manufacture the equipment that's
And just to follow up on Senator Rashid, you basically said this is an immediate safety hazard. You understand that you've got to go through a procedure in order to get the equipment that you need. What is the facility doing to ensure the safety of detainees? As you acknowledge faulty equipment, what's happening?
So the status currently is that the detainees that were involved in the event have been placed in areas when those locks were not an issue. And so that's what we're doing now. And then, of course, we already had controlled movement, so we continue with controlled movement, and we're increasing and we recently increased the number of staff, and we're trying to do that even more.
Just for clarification, so because this is illuminating to me, so there are areas where the lock is not a problem, because from what the perception is that you have a lock issue. The information is not that you have a lock issue on the 4th floor or the 5th floor. What people are concerned about is that there's a lock issue. So now what you're saying for clarification, that the lock problem is isolated in a particular place, and it's not permanent throughout the facility.
That's what I'm saying, and now, you know, it's difficult for me to talk about things that I think are really security, because I certainly don't want to educate someone who may not know, you know, that's in the jail on what our status is. Although I think everybody knows it's a detainee. But I'll give you an example. The 5th floor has a different type of locking mechanism, and it has not been compromised. Various prisons and jails have different levels, and based on the level of jail you're in, for example, medium, the grade of the lock or the security of the lock is different. And I wasn't aware of that until I got to a jail. I would think you want to use the best lock possible, but apparently there's different grades of lock. And so on 2 of our floors here, it has that locking mechanism that the detainees have been able to compromise. MSI, which is an older jail, and I guess it doesn't, I don't want to try to tell you technical stuff that I don't know, but that older lock is more secure. And so that's why we moved some people to MSI. So the people that got involved in demonstrating they were willing to come out of their cells and be disobedient, as it were, we have placed those people in the units that we know have a different type of locking mechanisms.
Commissioner Glass?
Yes.
Are the areas that you had the disturbance in, are those currently being used, or are those shut down for repairs?
They are shut down for repairs.
Thank you.
So earlier you had said, you meet with a group of the detainees that are here then?
Yes, we have what we call wing representative meetings.
And that's pretty often.
We try to do it once a month, but I'm not going to say we are consistent with that. Our last one was in February, and then we had one in January as well.
And in the packet, if I remember, and maybe some of the things that came up in the meeting were in the packet.
I don't know what's in the packet, but anything that you guys want, anything you want to see, know, need from us, you got it.
Well, the first thing I would like to see, there's been a lot of conversations that's been had in the past about the lack of sunshine requests given to the media. And by way of the videos, there's been conversations had about drugs being brought into the prison by way of officers, as well as, and I would like for you to elaborate on that.
So are those 2 different questions or one?
2, 1, we're dealing with a drug issue
Okay.
inside the prison. 2, we are dealing with the video and the lack of transparency when it comes to the media request for video. But I would like our committee to be able to look at those videos so that we can have a better understanding as to what occurred and how we got here. Okay.
Anything you want is available to you. I'll make anything you ask for available.
And the video should start in January.
Anything you need. The one thing about video to the public, I'd like it for it to go through a process just for security reasons. I understand that those things are sunshine. Particularly, my concern particularly is around, first we need to review what happened.
Sure.
What do we need to do, and those kind of things. And I'd like to do that first. In fact, I responded to a committee with the Board of Aldermen that let me get all the information together, run it by the Public Safety Committee through a closed session, and let the attorney say, this is good to release, don't release that. But I can tell you, the city attorneys have told me they'll eventually gonna have to release that. And so I'm trying to make sure that it doesn't demonstrate how the equipment works or any kind of compromise of that nature, where the cameras are and all that. And so I'm trying to be very cognizant of that issue. But as far as releasing the video, it's not because I'm concerned. The video will show you what I know to be true. How we responded, what happened, and all that. Now, once the event was in play, they covered the video. So there's going to be no video to see what's going on inside of the unit. But you can see what happened leading up to it.
Yeah, well, it's not, the task force hopefully is not just about what happened that day.
Sure.
I mean, that was a boiling point.
Sure.
You know, and it boiled over. And so I do believe that if we want to get to a solution to what occurred that day, we have to go back. And we have to look at what have occurred leading up to that. And I think that the videos will be able to give us a clearer understanding moving forward in terms of what should be the next steps.
Sure.
You
And I think
understand?
also-
It will be available.
And I think also as we talk to Brad, who is a consultant for the task force, he'll give us some direction based upon his experience as to what we need. I think the task force has already indicated what we're looking for, but you've indicated that you'll make yourself available to us. The wing representatives, could they be made available?
Yes.
As well?
Of course, if they're willing.
If, I mean, obviously, based upon their willingness. And the other thing is that you mentioned having to go through the public safety committee, but I'm hoping that with the chair of the public safety committee and the vice chair already on the task force, that might expedite, well, we can hold meeting already 24 hours. Okay.
Well, I was saying that in response to the question about the sunshine request,
Right.
not about this committee.
Right.
This committee can see.
Right.
If you don't mind, I just want to back up a little bit and talk me through protocols of when a police officer arrests somebody and they show up on your doorstep. Walk me through what happens to that person up until they appear in court.
So this building, I know everybody calls it the jail, but this building is operated by the Division of Corrections, the police, their processing center, the sheriff, and used to be marshals before they joined the police. So when an individual is arrested, they end up on the first floor of this building where police process them in. I have medical staff so that they can check the medical health of the person, the individual who's arrested. There is a requirement to have a medical check within 4 hours. So I provide medical staff to make that, allow that to occur. Then once they are processed and fit for confinement, which means we are able to provide whatever medical services that individual needs here in this building, they go up to the second floor. That's where they're still in police custody, and they continue their processing of that individual, pictures, fingerprints, things like that. But what we do, the tanks that are on the second floor belong to the police. My staff manage those, supervise those tanks. Tanks. Yeah, they're holding cells. Oh, another term that we use. But then they have their court appearance. So they're staged for the sheriffs, and the sheriffs interact with the court. And so they would take the arrestee to court. Once the court makes a decision about that individual's fate status, they either are released and we process them out, or there's a bond that is set, and if they're unable to make that bond, or there is no bond that is set, then they are under my supervision of jurisdiction. We then classify them determine where they need to be placed, who's an enemy, who's a co-defendant, all those kinds of things, and then we place them within the division.
What's the percentage of violent versus non-violent inmates inside here?
I don't have that information. So what the categories, and you'll see, I have a dashboard on the city website, but you'll see felonies, misdemeanors, and ordinances. Percentages, I will tell you that at any given time, we have maybe 10 people that are misdemeanors and 2 people that are ordinance, and all the rest are felonies.
But you don't know if they're violent or non-violent.
No.
Why
Okay.
would you know that?
Well, I don't know, and because I'm not an attorney, so I don't want to get too far afield of what I do know. But it would require me to know not only the class of the offense that they were charged with, which I don't track, only for classification purposes, because we treat everybody the same with respect. But it would also require me to have some detail about what they were arrested for, and I don't have that. Because they haven't been convicted, so I don't have that information. That I don't know.
But you know someone.
I'm sorry, so I just wanted to finish his line.
Yeah, and I did have a question I didn't answer that you asked. Should I answer that now? Is that okay? You asked me about drugs. So, drugs get in every jail and prison, and our job is to detect how that happens and address it. And then they find another way. And then we figure that out and they move to something else. During COVID, we've seen a rise in drugs coming into jails across the country. And again, without trying to teach somebody how to overcome a system, but one of the big things we're dealing with now is mail. And them trying to get drugs into the mail. When we were seeing drugs coming in on arrested people, we have equipment now where sort of like X-ray machine that we can see and detect if they have it on their person when they come in. But I mean, it's no secret how drugs come in. Either they come in on the arrestee, a staff member or contractor might bring it in, or it comes through the mail or some other person. So that's, I mean, I'm not bringing.
So tell me this
news
here. They can come in through officers here. They can come in through mail. What are you doing to try to ratify the situation in terms of the drugs coming inside? I mean, what's your method to reduce the amount of drugs or eliminate drugs coming into the prison?
Eliminate quite key. What we do is we have 2 search stations for people coming in. We monitor that, and obviously we train our people and talk to them about drugs and all those kind of issues. I explain the equipment we have for arrestees that are coming in, and we screen the mail to the best of our ability. The most popular thing we see now is some drugs that they're able to melt down, paste on paper, and then mail it in. You don't even see it. We try to figure a way to detect it and strip it and share it, and sell it, and all those kinds of things. So I've seen every way imaginable drugs coming into facilities during my 40 years. Into contract providers, delivery trucks, staff members, all kinds.
I'm sorry, point of clarification. I want 2 questions. One, is there a time limit on our ability to have this meeting today? And 2 is that, because if it is, and if it's not, there are some, I have it in writing, I want to ask the question, give it to them right, ask the question. I have a litany of things I want to ask for that I can review, and then it will help me formulate a better picture and contribute to what it is that I think we're trying to do. And so I just want to make sure that today was more of an introduction, general questions. We weren't going to get into specific, but we would determine what the structure would be, how we would proceed. Brad would give us some direction on that. If we're saying together, if we're saying, you know, hour and a half, 2 hours, what's the pleasure of the task force? Do we want to commit today? We started at 2, a little bit after 2. Do we want to say that we're going to 3:30? That's an hour and a half, knowing that we're going to have to meet as often as necessary. But today, we're not, I don't think we're trying to be here for 5 hours, but we're trying to at least allow everybody to have a general understanding and appreciation of what's going on. So what's the pleasure of the group? Do we want to say 2 hours?
That'd be maximum for me.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, but I think that the questions and answers are just all, in some ways, all over the place.
They are.
So again, you know, I just want to have the opportunity with things that I think I need to know. And I just like to have opportunity to go through this and ask if those things can be provided. Some of it, I think, now that I have this package, have already been provided, but I think they're going to be critical if I want to really make a contribution to what it is that we have.
I agree, and I think you have questions. I think others have questions.
Yeah, I think, you know, you raised an important question earlier, and what you sent us is, you know, can we do any one-on-one type of things? Like, I could probably do a really deep dive in the health and public health, food, sanitation, on cold water, COVID stuff, that y'all may not even want to do. You know, what's our ability to sit down with the class and his team that's over that and, you know, walk through that and come back to the group possibly. I mean, I don't know. We just need to, I think about like how we
So
want to
can
work
we-
as a team. on different issues. Like,
So then
take
can we-
on the drugs and, you know.
And can we agree that as far as when Mr. Pruitt said, Mr. Pruitt has a list of questions he wants to ask, as far as information is indicated, maybe in the packet. We did submit, we do have some questions that may help us also in determining roles and responsibilities, as you indicated. Everybody may not be interested in saying, following up on the same thing to bring it back. So can we go ahead and do that now? And it falls within
Relative to.
but I was going to ask the Alderman if he would conclude, then Mr. Pruitt, with your questions. We'll go over that.
Before we get started, I think building off what Pruitt was saying, understanding what are we trying to achieve for today? I think kind of really crystallizing what that looks like so that we know where to stop. So I think that's part of what he's getting at. We have what the mayor has said, where she would like for this focus to begin. And so we have to look at what are our outcomes that we want to have, and then how we start divvying up how we're going to go about getting that. Because we're going to keep going round and round.
But we're not going to do that.
Well, I think when the
we're not going to go round and round. We're going to do exactly what we indicated. Mr. Glass is here, he's going to answer the questions.
And that's what he's doing, and that's what
And then we're
he's
going
supposed to do.
do the structure.
And so, you know,
I'm
and I
not
don't think
suggesting we
that,
don't do that, but I'm just saying we always need to make sure that what is the objective? What do we really want to achieve for the day? And that's going to really determine where we can break.
we want an
And follow
understanding as to what has happened and what happened that day of the riot and beyond.
Which follows the agenda. So
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
okay,
follows the
yeah, no, I
agenda.
just wanted to state it, because it's inferred and not actually.
If you want.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Pruitt.
Yeah, I just think it's important that we understand the process, the personal process.
Right.
So that I can, you know, be helpful on the back end and recommendations on how we can make things better. So that's all my questions are going to relate to that. And so I want to go back to Commissioner Glass. You said classified detainees, then place. So when you say classified, I want to make sure I'm clear. So you classify them as misdemeanor, felony, or ordinance? What do you mean you classify them?
What we look for is their ability to live safely within the facility. As I indicated, for example, if the individual has an enemy, we want to know where that enemy is and the location, so those two are separated. We separate victims. Obviously, we separate men and women. And we obviously separate people that are certified adult under the age of 17. And so we have to make sure that we know those placements. We also look at other things about risks and needs. We look at needs, it could be anything from medical requirements, mental health requirements. Are they suicidal? Do they have drug issues? Did the court order that keep these 5 people from each other? All that's part of it and much more, part of the classification process. And so that's what I mean when I say that.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So is it that everyone that the police picks up off the street come to your doorstep and then they go this way or that way? I mean, how do they get the MSI for example?
So what that would be when the court has determined from the initial hearing that a bond is set or there will be no bond. If they don't make the bond or there is no bond, then they come to us and we start that process of classification. And as it relates to MSI versus CJC, MSI stands for medium security institution. So we try to send the people that would fall in that category to MSI. And then the more serious offenses are here at CJC.
But when did you determine that? So the police, when the police pick somebody up off the street, where do they come first?
First floor.
Here.
Well, I'm sorry, they have districts.
No, I'm past the district.
Okay,
Here
correct.
for processing. So they come here. And so they come here and then they go to, where do they go before they classify? I'm getting kind of confused.
They come in on the first floor,
Right.
with the police process. And then if they are medically sound and the police don't release them prior to that, they go to the second floor, which is also controlled by parts of it controlled by the police, parts of it controlled by me, parts of that second floor controlled by the sheriffs. And on the second floor, they await their first appearance in court.
How long does that normally take?
I don't want to try to respond to legal issues. There is a time frame that they must be seen by. I don't want to try to.
Okay, so
Mr.
why-
Alderman, does this, but does these questions, do they speak to at least the concern about time that people have in it? Because I do understand, the information you're trying to give, but I also want to make sure that we move this.
okay, so let me say this thing. Can you give me a flow chart? So for the sake of respect for everybody's time, can you give me a flow chart of when they come up on your doorstep and then they go here, there, wherever they go, how do they end up at MSI, ordinance violations, how long they stay here, who adjudicates them? I need a nice flow chart so that I can understand, because, people would say, hey, somebody's been there on an ordinance violation for 2 months, so understanding how that could be possible and all that kind of stuff.
Well, even our dashboard will tell you
Okay.
the average of the state with that.
Okay.
particular-
No, I understand that. I'm not questioning the average with the state right now, but I just want to know how it flows and so that we'll know who's responsible for what.
And is it
That's
fair
very
to say
helpful.
that everyone here has not had their day in court yet?
So you're asking me if some of the people here have been convicted?
Yeah, yes, because you said there's
I
the
think it's-
issue of, going to court and determining whether they can or cannot make bond as a measurement, determine where they're going. So is it fair to say that everyone that's being held here has not had that opportunity in court to be determined whether they could even make bond or not?
No, there's a deadline by which they must appear in court. And I don't have any thing to do with that. I just make them available for the sheriff so that they can go to court.
So
They
that
give me
ties
a
to the
list,
second
we're
issue.
gonna be seeing these people tomorrow, make sure they're ready. And so once that happens, and they remain in jail, then they're waiting for the court to set the next court.
And once they're convicted, do they go to a state facility?
So again, I don't want to reach, but in Missouri, if you're convicted for a year or less, you serve that in local jail. We have very few people that are convicted. I think maybe now we have maybe two, the last time I checked. And the rest are pre-trial waiting for final determination.
Hence detainee versus inmate. The language, most of the folk are detainees.
Well, detainee is a broader term that covers all of it. I think the only distinction is you say pre-trial.
Can I, Mr. Stewart has a question in reference to what is in the packet of information. I don't know, Brad, if you're in a better position to answer questions about what is or is not in the packet.
I know what's in there.
Okay,
No, I'm just saying some of my questions have already been answered because of what I just gleaned out.
got it.
So let me do real quick. Can you take one of the things down so they can follow me? And that way, and so I'm not asking, yeah, I'll tell you, this is what I like to see. I think some of the answers are in here. I'm gonna talk about them broadly, so you understand what I'm getting at, and I can check out what you can provide and not provide. And the reason why, Mr. Chairman, the reason why a lot of these questions are, because my understanding was from the beginning was one of the things that we were gonna look at, what precipitated this, and everybody feels this is something that was growing and it's crescendo, and this is how we got there. And the other big thing for me is actually the prisoner's rights and what rights they have, what rights they don't, from a civil rights standpoint. And so having some idea of what complaints it consisted of and stuff like that is going to help me. But like, for instance, at the beginning, I'm asked about, and I'm saying broadly, I'm just trying to get an understanding, have you received court orders or filings or motions from the court in which somebody representing a prisoner has said that this detainee is not being treated humanely, and they went to the courts and filed something for that detainee's behalf to force you all to comply? Have you got anything like that you received for the past 12 months? It'd be helpful to know that. And Mr. Chair, I asked that question because in most cases, a lot of these detainees are represented by counsel. And I would have an issue if a counsel has seen his client and his client is suffering, and the counsel did not ask the court to file something on behalf of that detainee in the court to seek a court order to make the facility comply or address that inhumane treatment. And if nothing has been filed, I'm very curious to find out why. If based on all of the stuff we're hearing about, all these dramatic things that happen to detainees while they're in here, I'm just trying to figure out why their lawyers are not representing them if they represent them, period. And so anything like that, if you give me some indication that that's all that asks.
I guess you're gonna go down here, but I'm just gonna make a general comment about that first.
Sure.
The city counselor's office would be the one that has that information.
But if I have a client here, and the client has been mistreated, and I go to the court and file something that says that my client has been mistreated in the CJC, the courts also would give notice, I guess, to the city council's office that one of the cities is being demanded to come there. You mean you would know about it?
Yes, I would most like to see the copy too and forward it to the
Okay,
city
yeah,
council.
so I just wanted, so I'm just asking for the number, the frequency that has occurred over the past 12 months. If you have anything that deals with that, I'd just like to know.
I'll reach out to the
Okay. As relates to process and procedures for grievance and discipline, again, I'd like to get a summary. I'm sure that you have it in writing. I would like to read what you have in writing that's outlined and spelled out. What the detainee that has a process or want to be disciplined, what are the rules of engagement and what does that look like? I'm assuming that's in writing, right?
Yes, it's actually online.
Okay, if it's online, if you just point me to where
Sure.
online.
What number was that?
B, that's in B.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, okay.
Yes, Brad.
recommendation that I know we have to still define what our goal is here and make sure we stay within the parameters of that as a thing, but I think we're going to have I would assume we're going to have a large data request for the commissioner and his staff, I would recommend that following, agreeing upon what our parameters are and our steps going forward, that we create a list of documents that we want to see rather than, kind of giving them piecemeal to the commissioners so they have a chance to gather everything and we all have a chance to see everything and assess it. So I would ask that we hold off on asking for specifics until we get a process and then put a list together for everyone.
Okay, and I think that we're saying the same thing. I think Mr. Truitt does have a list. And I think that once we go through this list, anything else that we need to include, we can include. But I think that what Mr. Truitt is submitting is pretty complete, very clear, self-explanatory. But then once we go through this list, Brad, we will follow up with what you just said and add to that. So with Mr. Truitt, you want.
But let me offer this for the sake of time too, because this is pretty lengthy,
Yeah,
and I'm not sure if we need to read everything on here, and if we could just submit what our requests are, and then receive the answers for the following meeting.
Okay,
It might
but
be.
Can we, but
It takes me 5 minutes, as you know, I'm not reading all of this.
And
I'm giving him.
I'm going to give
an
you-
overview.
Mr.
What
Truitt,
I'm
please
doing.
continue.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, on process, I just like to see what those documents are, understand what that is and read it so that I have a better understanding. As it relates to health and welfare, the same thing, I'm just trying to understand what they're entitled to, what they're not entitled to, who's received it, who has not received it over the past 12 months. That give me some help. On the administrative side, I'm assuming that, I'm sorry. Same thing on process and procedures for personnel on number D. I know that some of that personnel stuff maybe cannot do, but in general, it'd be helpful to know that if you got a lot of personnel to be disciplined because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and especially if they have interaction with detainees that are responsible for them having to be disciplined, that'd be great. On these phone calls, I don't know if you have it or not, but at least are you tracking? In other words, when somebody calls and says my loved one or someone in the facility is not being treated right, they call, file a complaint or inquire, do you track that?
Well, I'm trying to think of how that might occur. We don't have that happen very often. Sometimes family will reach out to us and say, hey, I haven't talked to my daughter in a while. And we tell the daughter, hey, mom wants to call. But if there's very seldom is there something that they're asking us to investigate or whatever. But then we do have an investigative team that would have
They have access to a phone. The thing,
yes, they have.
their phone. Does it cost like $5 a minute or something?
I don't know what the cost is.
It's pretty.
Well, I think we're comparable or with it than most, but I don't know what it is off the top of my head.
It's pretty.
Yeah, the frequency on the maintenance and repairs, and I know you went through some of it, it'd be great to know if something broke, what's the process, of how to deal with, how much stuff you got out here, how much, in other words, are you spending tons of money on an ongoing basis or having to fix things all the time or sometimes? Because they talked about the age of the building and stuff. On number G, on the administrative side, I think it's fairly easy because the question is, more on this is, what sort of reporting are you required to do and over what frequency are you required to do that to administration? In other words, are you keeping them informed, or there's some statutory or regulatory requirements where you keeping them informed about what's going on in here? Demographics, I think that's in here, but it's great to understand what those demographics look like, or, what the population has flowed over the past 12 months.
All that stuff is online.
Okay, and then.
But I'll answer you.
Great, and then on the last one, supplemental, it's just number 5 on here. And that is it possible that folks can donate or contribute, organizations or folks contribute PPE and all the other stuff that you may need that you don't have, or that the prisoners or complain about it? If so, is there a process? It'd be great to know what that is.
There is not a process, but we're not in need of donations. We have
Okay.
more than enough.
Got it.
Early on, in COVID, the church reached out to us and had interaction with us and wanted to donate some of those kinds of things. And I informed them that we had plenty, and there may be others in the community that might need that
Well,
donation.
just a quick follow-up question. If you have as much as you need, and folks are saying prisoners, detainees are complaining about not getting it, so it'd be great to be able to reconcile.
You may never be able to reconcile. Because-
I mean, don't you track how much you have and how you distribute it? Okay, that can be great to understand that. That'd be great. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate it.
Thank you. And Brad, we'll make sure that you get a copy of this too, so that you can include it in your documentation. I think that we've got to a point, and please, for me as chair, all I'm trying to do is facilitate the discussion. So you'll find that particularly now, I'm definitely not trying to control anything, but just try to keep us focused.
I have one other question before we move forward. And that is pertaining to the COVID testing. Can you elaborate a little bit on the process for COVID testing for detainees?
So the COVID testing has evolved as it has in the community about who tests and when to test and all of that. What we do is first we make COVID testing available to anyone that wants it. They can either submit a request, they can just go to the officer and verbally request it.
So you don't do it once they come in and when they go out?
No,
You don't
no.
just automatically test?
No, we don't automatically test. We test if they request it, or if our medical staff determine that there are symptoms or issues. And then we broaden that test based on our findings. The one thing that creates an issue for us, just like in the community, we can't force people to test. And you might be, well, you probably won't be surprised. Just like in the community, there are a lot of people that say, no, I won't test. And if we believe or have reason to believe that they may be ill, then even if they don't take a test, we isolate them over that time frame that is required and take temperatures and do all that kind of thing, whether they took the test or not. But we can't force them to take tests. We have plenty of tests available, and they can.
Well, that should be a policy. I mean, there should be a
could be a
policy in place
policy.
where, you know, when you get, just like when you book it, you know, this is a health issue here.
When they take their DNA.
Yeah, so I mean, listen,
But is it a matter of, right, is
That's
it a matter of the constitutional right that you cannot force them to take a test? Because I guess we're trying to understand, you said you can't make them do it. All I'm asking is, you can't make them do it because by constitution, by law, you can't make them do it. That's all.
I don't know what that requirement is. We should consider what happens in the community because they are citizens that have been convicted. But the other thing is, we will choose not to wrestle them to the floor and stick something up their nose. That might be pretty problematic.
Understood, but you're talking about, I mean, understood, you're talking about close proximity, 600 and some people in a closed environment. You know, so I'm just saying, I understand what you're saying, but I guess people will ask the question that if one of the problems is COVID related, if one of the issues that we're dealing with is COVID related, and there's a concern, then obviously there has to be something done.
mandatory testing.
Right.
But
Which
what he
might be
said-
mandatory,
but what he
because you've
said-
got some places that require mandatory testing.
But what he said, they isolate. So how long do you isolate each person if they're in a cell by themselves?
So when I said isolate, I was referring to those that presented.
Right.
We've only had the patients that we've had, the people that we've had that got COVID were asymptomatic. So far, only 5 were more than asymptomatic. We had 2 or 3 that had muscle aches, and then the remainder had a fever. No one's gone out to the hospital, required hospital, or anything of that nature. So when an individual wants to be tested, we test them. We even send teams out of medical and classification staff to try to encourage and convince them to test. We stop short of holding them down. But again, if they present, then we do isolate them. The other thing I would indicate is that, so we social distance inside the jail, and obviously it's a jail, so you know that that's going to be limited. But like before, when we did rec, people had longer periods of rec, more people might be on rec at the same time. We reduced it to, I think we might start out with 10, maybe now 15, that rec at a time. They got to wear their mask when they come out of their room and those kinds of things. And of course, we have a whole bunch of additional protocol that might be before the releases on our website. So that's the approach that we take. The nurses, medical staff make rounds 3 times a day in all the units at both locations and talk to the detainees during their sick call and their path and check on temperatures and things like that. So that's what we do. And when they're arrested, and then they're committed to us, we isolate them for 14 days regardless before they go into general population.
But
And
you probably do that. Okay, let me clarify the language for everybody.
okay,
Quarantine means you separate, they may or may not assign you some isolation, or is think of ill, isolation, like sick people.
thank you.
So you probably need quarantine.
Yes.
And they're probably not alone, right? 14 days.
Or when they first come in,
Right.
they're in the same unit.
Right.
Yes.
Isolated by-
Yes. We have a unit where we place
Quarantine
them.
by unit.
Yeah, we have a unit where we place them to be quarantined for the 14-day period to pass, to see how they're doing, if we have concerns, if they have, before they go to a general population.
So that's all.
Before I want to turn over to Brad, but before that, Commissioner, it's just a question. You wouldn't have any objection, would you have any objection to a representative or former detainee from the Senate to be a member of the task force? Would you have any?
I have no comment whatsoever on the task force.
Okay.
When you say,
There's nothing.
we're the
there's
task
nothing
force,
legally that-
show us everything you got, that's my job.
I guess I just want to, as far as the center security concerns, that kind of thing. There's nothing from a security point of view that would prohibit a former detainee from being on the task force. Just from a standpoint.
I had, Mr. Chairman,
I know.
I had it on the list.
I know, that's why.
The reason I didn't ask him because the merger of the appointment is the task force.
Yeah, but I just wanted to make sure that there was nothing as far as facility wise that was precluded. But of course, this is a question we would have to ask the mayor.
Well, and I will indicate this. Of course, I would be concerned if a person on the task force was an enemy of somebody inside and they were coming inside, or a relative. But I don't have anything to do with who's on the task force. Okay, that's the mayor's.
Thank you very much. Brad,
Yes,
still
sir.
with us?
So this morning, I didn't, I had talked to the judge before he decided to step back. And when he stepped back, I kind of wanted to get some marching orders and understand the project. So I made contact this morning with Jacob Long from the mayor's office.
Okay,
And he reiterated again that the project or the task force goals, as you outlined in the beginning of the meeting, and talked a little bit about time frame, and pretty much left the rest of it up to the group on how we proceed. So I guess I just want to make sure, are we in agreement that our task force is looking at those 3 items that's included in that news article?
yes, we're in agreement. I think that one of the things, too, Brad, that we wanted to discuss as a task force, if we felt that was there anything else
Right.
that should be included in addition to those three that we felt as a task force might be urgent, or something that may fall under our responsibility. So,
Because what was not in here is the drugs infestation. Okay, and what's not in here is the fighting that we've heard in the news, where you have inmates and correctional officers pitting inmates against each other. We haven't talked about the death that occurred here by way of OD, overdose. So that's not in here either. But I think that those are the type of things that we need to begin to discuss as well. Because certainly there is a problem when it comes to drugs inside the prison. How are we as a body going to come up with a solution to fix that problem?
So I'm glad you brought those items
because
up.
I think, Brad, for us, I think it was that we obviously agree on the three things that the mayor identified. But, and correct me if I'm wrong to the task force, as Senator Nasheed said, if the idea is to look back and investigate what happened in the uprising and move backward, what precipitated,
Right.
that yes, it may be the allegations around food and water and temperature and clothing, but if we're hearing that there are other things too that may have taken place to precipitate it, then I think that is our belief that we should be able to investigate those things too. That's what
Absolutely.
you're saying.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think,
Because we want to get to the bottom line, and we want it to be a problem solvers here.
And Brad, if I may, just like you mentioned, number one, it talks about alleged concerns and complaints regarding food, water, and temperature and clothing. Are you saying that our scope is limited to the 3 days before the incident?
no,
As relates to complaints regarding these matters?
no, absolutely not. We would
Okay,
look
so
at,
I think that's what we're getting at, that in order to really understand what precipitated all of this, because my assumption is let's be clear. Unfortunately, there have been allegations and activists surrounding about things that are going on in this facility for some time now. I'm not saying it's true or untrue, but it has.
Mhm.
And as a task force, we're in public. Folks are going to judge us based on how we perceive and what they think we do or don't do. And so the questions that I ask mainly are to give me a better understanding and footing so that I can say, no matter what comes out of here, this is what I believe precipitated and what has been going on and not going on in the jail to the public that relies, at least on me and my capacity as NACP, to be fairly straightforward and truthful. So that's all I'm trying to accomplish. And hopefully it supports these objectives that are down there. I think it do, but if you think that it does not, I have no problem having that discussion to try to reconcile what our difference of opinions are.
no, I agree. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think what we're going to see is that, it's kind of like a spoke in a wheel. Everything goes to the center and everything's going to kind of come together. And that's why I offered up the document that I provided as a possible way to go forward and us doing as an operational assessment as a group. And we would do a full operational assessment of the entire facility and look at all the issues and evaluate those. And then we would come up with recommendations from there. And those are provided in that document, but we would certainly drill down on those three major areas already identified.
No, I think that the task force, Brad, I think has indicated that they're prepared to move forward with that. I think we understand that I indicated our role is to investigate, with not to litigate. So that's what we're looking at doing. I think that everybody received just the notes that I sent out. I'm not gonna go over these, give everybody a chance to kind of look at them.
It's in the packet.
And then we can make a determination. So Brad, based upon you being the consultant for the group, why don't you run us through what you are recommending as a process moving forward?
Okay, so what I recommend is, now that we've kind of agreed on our scope, which is obviously an overall assessment and drilling down on some of the issues in that list, that we get that document list that has already been requested there. If we could share that, and then everyone else would add to that, and we would put a one-time, not a one-time, but a data request into the to the jail staff, and we could get that data so we can examine that beforehand. But I'd be happy to coordinate that if you want to send me that list, and then we could just email it in. I could put together one list if you'd like, unless somebody else would like to coordinate it, that's fine. But I have a whole list of data that I normally would request that I can certainly add to that, send it out. I could send that out yet this weekend, and people can add to it, and we can have that into the commissioner by whatever you guys decide, whether you want it in by Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever, and then give them a week or so to get that data together, because it's going to be quite a package, I would assume.
Okay, Mr. Pruitt suggested or recommended, can we send it to Brian and have Brian give everything to you?
Brian shaking his head.
Brian, are you saying yes?
Yes.
Oh, Brian, okay. So Brad, Brian is gonna be that liaison, so we'll get it to Brian and he'll get everything to you so that we can try to get that one-time request. My question also though, Brad, is that if one of the issues is dealing with beginning to move cases through the 22nd Judicial Circuit, does that also mean that we need to have a conversation with those who are responsible for that? Because that's not the responsibility of the senator. That's the responsibility of the court system, isn't it? That's two different entities.
Yes,
So will you be responsible for setting up a meeting with those responsible for facilitating that?
I certainly can. I think, what's going to come clear out of our assessment, and already the data that even the commissioner has said that today, in the data that I provided from previous assessment, that there's a whole lot of people sitting there that are waiting to go to trial for a lot longer than what's normal across the country. So to get to the root bottom of that issue, we need to have someone from the courts to offer up, their assessment of what's happening and their assessment of what can be done to alleviate that.
So we'll leave that to you to facilitate as soon as you can put that together.
Certainly.
Speaking of meeting with stakeholders, will we be meeting with those individuals who have been on the forefront fighting for the detainees, such as OBS?
I think that is one of the things.
Or city defenders?
How do we receive, can we receive written or in-person testimony from individuals, organizations, et cetera? So I think that is in what Mr. Pruitt submitted. So I guess, is that a question that, I would suspect that we should be able to gather information from whatever source we feel is
It's up to
relevant.
us, yeah.
I think that should be the preview of the task force.
We call it a listening session.
One thing I would say, because even in public safety is concerned, some of the groups are suing the city, and we can't allow certain groups to propose Commissioner Glantz, because then it'll come up in court. Well, you said this in that meeting, but then in your deposition, you said this. Which one is it?
No, I think,
No, we're not saying
it's
that.
just them being
No,
able to talk, to give us information on it. Only to us.
I know, but if there's Zoom, if we're talking about any of that, my guess would be that we would have to be in a closed session. I just know that I've been also warned that, if you're being sued by somebody with a car accident, yet we're gonna depose you in an open meeting.
That's not what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
no, and I don't think, I understand what you're saying. I understand.
Right.
And I don't think that we're saying that. I think all we're saying is giving organizations and entities an opportunity to submit testimony to us. As Dr. Pruitt said, someone may have, some lawyer, some group may say, this is a list of 20 letters that we've submitted. And these are 20, we're giving you these 20 letters that we've submitted on behalf of our clients. We're giving you that as quote unquote evidence. So that's all we're saying. We
Do you want to do that
do.
as a listening session, or do you want to do that as having written documents?
Well, I'm sorry, Brad, hold on, Alderman Carl was speaking. I'm
Sorry.
I just know that in the county public safety, and then again, ways and means, where the attorney that was suing the city was actually allowed for 20 minutes. So asked Commissioner Glass 20 questions, and he was answering them, which concerned me.
Yeah.
Because he, you know, I mean,
Yeah, that's not germane.
no, it's not gonna happen.
It's not germane.
Alderman, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah, we agree with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, I
No, we agree with you 100%. We were basically,
Right,
Glass won't be a part of those discussions.
Right, that's fine. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brad.
I was just going to say that, I guess as a group, we could decide, do you want to just offer up that those individuals and advocates could submit something in writing, or do you want to open it up to a listening session? I'm sure we wouldn't want to respond at this point or put anybody else in the hot seat, but if they want to just speak to the issues and complaints they have, we could either have them do that in writing, or if you want to have a listening session, or both.
Well, I think, what's the pleasure of the task force? Brad indicated that it's possible to do both. I know Mr. Truitt has indicated in his submission, he indicated written or in-person testimony.
Whichever it was.
Yeah. If we're gonna do that, it's gonna be better for you to Zoom. The only reason why.
Yeah, we know that.
If I can continue. We do these in public safety, and then meetings go on for roughly 4, 5, 6 hours. Because they have the ability to call other friends that, even though we say people within 3 minutes or 5 minutes, they see the same message over and over. And we understand that, but I would say, rather than come down here and ask. No, I think there's no reason to look. No, I think we're in agreement that we would definitely do Zoom. When we say in person, we're basically talking about Zoom, and you're right. And if we agree as a task force, I mean, we have a format where we would control as much as we can the time and that. So are we agreeing then, Brad, that we'll look at doing both and rather than either or? Because some may be prepared to do a Zoom meeting, and some may just be willing to just submit something in writing. As a task force, Alderman.
I want to be clear. There's a difference. So when I hear listening session, in which I'm very interested in, I don't have a problem with, you listen to what people have to say. But if we're going to go into a question and answer period, that will take hours and hours. And I think that's what Alderman Vaccaro was saying. You know, and people, I'm certainly open to have people give testimony, if you will, to some concerns. But if people are gonna one by one ask Commissioner Glass a whole bunch of questions, and we keep going back and forth, I don't think that would be as productive.
It's a listening.
And I think we have to have a listening.
I just want to be
To receive
clear.
it.
That's all I'm saying, is I just want to be clear, and I want the public to be clear, because, you know, we're operating right now in a public space, and some people hear what they want to hear. And so I just want to be clear that if we're going to have a listening session, we're going to listen to concerns. We're not going to have rebuttals, and we're not going to have all this back and forth, because, you know, that could.
That's right.
I think that's the consensus.
Yeah,
Okay.
a listening session.
I'm super cool with that.
And I'd be happy to put together some criteria for everybody to review that would kind of direct that along to keep it in a orderly fashion.
All right, thank you, Brad.
And Mr. Chairman, I don't envision the reason why Mr. Glass would be a part of those sessions in the first place.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm thinking this is people who want to share their concerns with the task force, so that the task force can take in consideration the information they provided.
That's right.
We can't answer questions about anything that's going on in the facility, because we're just getting exposed to it, and definitely we can't offer up Mr. Glass or anybody else for anybody else. It's just that people are saying, instead of calling me on the phone and saying, we're referring you all out of this man. No, listen, here's the opportunity for you to make that statement to the entire task force. And then as a task force, we make a decision about how relevant it is or it's not to what it is we're trying to do.
And everyone's getting the same information at the same time.
Correct.
All right, Brad, you said you could set up, I'm sorry, Dr. Norris?
One thing, if we're gonna be doing these lessons, we ought to give some consideration to when and what are we going to communicate to the public. I think that's gonna be important. It's one thing to receive, but the public is going to want to have some kind of updates. And so I think we just need to give some consideration to when that's going to happen and how that's going to happen.
Well, we should consider doing, if we're gonna do some of it, we should consider doing it in the evening when people are not at work.
Brad, did you hear that? Are you able to hear? Alderman Vaccaro has a very soft voice. And then the mass is not helping.
I missed his last comment. Something about people working in the evening?
Yes, that the listening sessions be done in the evening to accommodate, to try to accommodate more people than less.
Absolutely. I'll put together some criteria and send it out to everyone, and we can hack it up and come to an agreement.
And as Dr. Norris indicated, and we put it on there, just basically trying to understand our time frame, what we're operating under. We understand that the mayor's term is about two months, but there's a sense of urgency in this, Brad.
Correct.
So as you are going through setting up some time frame for us to consider, if you would factor in a sense of urgency on that.
Okay.
Also on what we're going to say to the public.
Well, I think that at the end, I think that you're talking about the final.
I don't know if there, I don't know if we can go to the end and then get something. Do we have to do anything before that?
Well, I think the fact that this is everything we're doing right now is public.
Okay,
So that we wanted to make sure, obviously, from the beginning, that there would be transparency. So everything that we're doing is public.
we don't have to synthesize it in any way.
I will also recommend that the body as a whole interview both the detainees as well as the correctional officers so that we can get a sense of what's going on from their angle as well in order to be able to move forward.
And then I would think there would have to be a closed session. I mean, you can't put people, especially in Florida.
Well, he know how to do it.
I mean,
And Brad, you did hear that they do have wing representatives here. And so there may be an opportunity to speak to representatives of the detainees if they're willing and or speak to individual detainees. So that's an option too, Brad.
But not
Absolutely.
not just the detainees, as well as the correctional officers.
Right.
That work here,
Yeah.
the staff.
can
We interview both.
I would want to answer that. But then, just with Zoom, because we're talking now about employees, I think there could be some.
Yeah,
issues.
I think privacy rights, we have to consider that, but I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean,
would like
how
to
could we
talk
not?
about
How could we, I mean, if we're moving forward, how could we not talk to those that are here,
Well, I agree.
that's in the trenches about what's happening inside?
No,
I mean, so I think that there needs to be.
I agree 100%,
Yeah.
but should we put somebody, that's incarcerated before the public? They may not want to be public with it. And maybe staff may not want to be public with their comments as well, but,
So we go offline.
I think we can go.
I
into
just want
closed
to
session.
put it out there, yeah,
I think we can go
we
into
should have
closed
that
session.
conversation, but maybe not public.
I think we
We can
go.
go-
Let's just be clear, Brad, that if and when we get to a situation where we are interviewing a detainee and or staff or correctional personnel, that if it is their desire to speak to us, but anonymously, then we're able to grant that. We still have the information. We're just not putting people's identity out front. That's basically what we're saying.
Right. I would recommend you just, when you speak to detainees, that you don't use their name, period.
Okay. The
That's just my
suggestion-
recommendation.
Because it could affect them in a court case. Right, but, I would also say that if there's something that needs to be done, decide, Vice Chair of Public Safety, if it's an ordinance change or something we spend money on, I'll commit that we can have a public safety meeting within 24 hours of when you say, look, if we come up and say, this is something that we need to fix it, we need an ordinance, to try to put this in place, we can try and do that, because I still believe we're gonna have at least 3 or 4 more full board meetings as soon as the best decides what they're gonna do with COVID. So we could have more meetings, so it's not gonna be impossible to get something through, and I think we should commit to that.
Brad, you want to continue? You have anything else?
Sure. So I just kind of want to poll the group to see what sort of a time commitment that everybody is able to, I mean, are you looking at, once we get the documents and having a chance to review them, you're looking at 3-4 days a week committed to this for a bit, or is that too many?
Let's ask. I know I had in my head, I felt that if we're talking about urgency, in my head, I was thinking at least 2 days a week. That was in my head. But I don't, and that's what I was gonna propose, Brad. If we say 2 hours max, we're gonna manage this count. If we're saying a minimum of 2 hours, 2 days a week and 2 hours per meeting, I think, Brad, I'm looking around to see if, Senator, we're saying 2 days a week, 2 hours per meeting.
We don't have a lot of time, so you say 2 days a week?
I would think those would be full
2
days.
hours per
I say
meeting.
3 days a week, even on the weekend.
Some of us have regular kind of jobs.
I
We gonna
don't-
be using all
I
in the
don't
evening,
have
or
regular-
they gonna be in the evenings?
We can meet evening, you know, we don't necessarily, meet- or we can switch, it. We can do one meeting during the day, one meeting during the evening. It depends upon the availability of the group.
This is a very important
This
situation.
is an important situation, so
we need
we're meet like most by Zoom, not coming here. Right. So we can meet even if we are somewhere. Right. So we're talking about Zoom meeting. So can we commit to 3?
Are we committing to 3 hours a week?
No,
I mean, 3 hours, 3 days a
6
week,
hours a week.
but then there is the additional time to prepare for meetings.
Right,
I mean, we've got a binder to go through.
right.
We have, documents to go through. So I think we need to look at it, what kind of time commitment are we looking at per week? Because this is sounding like, 10, 15 hours a week, maybe.
I think for at least for next week, Brad, would you agree, Brad, that at least for next week, based upon what we have to do, are we looking at least meeting 3 days next week? And then if based upon that, if we say, okay, we're able to do 2 weeks, or, I mean, what are we looking at next week?
So my recommendation is that we get the data request in, and then we wait a week so we have time to review that data. And then we meet, because I plan to come on site, and, that involves some travel. So I'd like to come out for 3 days to kick this off. We'd have an initial planning meeting. We'd go through some logistics, do some planning, and talk about some of those things I listed in that document. Then we do a full tour and start our assessment as a group. And then we could plan from there. And then while we're at that, we would have that evening listening session in those 3 days. So I would say that's probably 2 weeks out.
I've got a real sense of urgency here.
So do I.
I mean, we've got families who think their families are sleeping in water with no heat, wrapping themselves in mattresses, not getting food and water. This can't be a month-long process that's planned. We need to look at what the current situation is in this facility and make some immediate recommendations for what they can address and how they put internal controls and processes in place that the families trust, that puts their minds at ease about how their loved ones are being treated. And that's not a month away.
Since we're here, can do the tour now. I mean, unless everybody has a time issue.
Well, we had planned on doing a short day of time for me, but we go to, But I think the tour, but hold on, I think the tour is one thing, and I think that we do need to do the visual, but I think that the other comment is, and what Brad just stated is that we give ourselves a week to get the information. And what we're saying is that we understand we've got to get that information, but what can we do in the interim to help to dispel, address some of the accusations slash the perception that people have?
The biggest one on there was a COVID test. And that was the nucleus as to why that outbreak came. I mean, the uprise. And what I'm hearing from the commissioner,
Yes, yes.
what I'm hearing from the commissioner is that anyone can be tested if they want to. Well, if that's the case, you know, why are these individuals coming out protesting because of the lack of testing?
And PPE, and he said he has all the PPE in the world.
I just don't, I mean,
So
do you understand what I'm saying? Pam, do you understand what I'm saying?
So should we do the
Answer
tour?
some of that.
But do you have
Yeah.
the ability to test?
Excuse me,
Should we do the tour?
excuse me, I'm good. So, I'm just basically trying to figure out, like Pam mentioned, how can we come with some short-term solutions and not wait 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 months? I mean, 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, but try to come up with some, you know, short-term solutions when it comes to even just the COVID testing and things of that sort.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you have the ability to test the 800 inmates that are here now?
I would have to check with my medical staff to see exactly how many tests they have, but
And can
they,
you
they
give us-
indicate that they tested it.
Yeah,
So
so-
I didn't ask them, well, how many tests do you have?
yeah,
So
I'm just trying to be
So
straightforward.
one thing we could offer is immediately is next week on Tuesday, anybody who wants to be tested can be tested.
Right.
And we can partner with Affinia
Yeah.
or any of those, I mean.
I mean,
that
there are
organization.
some things we could do to
Yeah.
address this stuff transparently and immediately, and I think we need to figure out how to
Well,
do
that-
that instead of get off on a long planning process and assessment. We can't reinvent the justice system in the 2 weeks we need to address some of these issues.
And I understand. That's why the question, because if we say Tuesday, we're gonna test everybody in here, and we only test 25 people, because that's all they have to test for.
Right, I
We're
agree.
gonna look like a bunch of liars, and we don't.
Right, it has to be coordinated.
But the commissioner is gonna find out.
Right.
What
You
your
have
capacity is.
the ability, I would say we should, no, I'm talking.
Okay, I just want to be clear so that.
If we have the ability to test. If we have the ability to test. We need to try and find it out by Monday. Okay, Tuesday. Then I really think we should meet on Tuesday. These are my opinions. But I think we should meet on Tuesday, so we know if we have the ability to test. And then pick a date and say, and I agree with Carl, Finney or whoever, but I think if we have the ability to do it, then I think we should. I think we pick a day and say, okay, Thursday, we're gonna, but, you know, we wanna make sure we have the ability before we say.
We're not gonna make anybody
Before you do it. But I think that the recommendation is that the center would begin to facilitate testing immediately based upon its resources. And that's basically what we're saying.
No, we're not saying that. We're saying that even if they don't have the resources, we're going to reach out to the outside organization like Affinia to be able to come in and test.
Understood.
Yeah.
So Commissioner.
Not just test.
With that request.
What about vaccines if they need it?
I think we have to.
They're not-
Testing.
Yeah, we don't have enough.
Yeah, they're not ready.
Commissioner, you,
Well-
that's, are you? I know you're clear about it.
Urban League, they're doing
I want to
vaccines.
make sure.
Can I, I'm sorry, now, just so that the commissioner is clear about what we're asking him to do for next week, because we're saying we meet, we're trying, that this request is for immediate facilitation.
Can I make a recommendation?
I am texting the medical account.
So Brad, why, I know you're holding, on. I'm sorry, Brad, the commissioner's checking out the feasibility of doing the immediate testing, and as the senator said, and to look at his stock availability.
Yes,
And as the senator indicated, we can always reach out to other federally qualified health centers to see if they can assist, be it Affinity, Peoples, KRSTL, right, that we can also reach out to them to assist.
I have
So based on my-
recommendation
And
that
what
I
do you
would
recommend?
make as an immediate action is, I know they're really swamped with COVID, but have the health department come in and do a routine public health inspection, hot, cold water, sanitation, laundry services, food service facility, temperatures right, refrigeration right. You know, I know you did that on a quarterly basis. It probably hasn't happened since COVID, I'm guessing.
Yes, it has.
Okay, so,
Usually when there's a complaint that reaches them, they come in,
yeah,
but, you know, whatever you want to do, I'm here.
because they can address stuff like, is the water turned on or not? Is the hot water working?
Who can make that
or not?
who do we need to make that request? Is that the mayor's office, or is that, would you request that they come in, or would the mayor just basically direct them to come in and do that?
I think we sent a letter to the mayor requesting that, making a recommendation on behalf.
When was the last time that happened?
I don't know the exact date. Within a week.
So you said within a week or two that happened?
I'm guessing. I'm, you know, yeah, because I don't want to be wrong, but recently they can come in.
Can you determine, let us know quickly how recent that was?
Sure.
It'd be great, yeah, for us to share that.
Yeah, I can ask them,
We could-
the health department.
I think
They keep record of where they're going in.
we could meet public safety.
can I make a recommendation?
I'm sorry, Brad, I'm sorry, yes, Brad, go ahead.
I just want to get back to the process and coordinating the assessment of the facility and its operations. I understand the urgency of the COVID testing and the pandemic, so perhaps the public health expert on the group could assess that immediately and come back to the next meeting with a recommendation just on COVID. But I think the other issues, you know, the laundry and the food sanitation, we're going to get to that through the assessment. But I still would recommend that we get the data first, and then we schedule a time where we would do an introductory session to do some planning as far as how we're going to go about the on-site assessment. And one evening, get that input from the community. And then in that 3-day jaunt or so that we start that assessment. But what I would like to do is I would like to plan like 3 steady days where I would come on site. One day would be our initial, bring us all up to speed as far as how we conduct the assessment, getting everybody on the same page, following up with a very in-depth tour, and then starting our assessment during those days. And we certainly could break off. We don't have to do it together. And if people aren't available every single day, that's fine. They might have some subject areas they're more versed on that they could work on. But I think a coordinated effort would suit the group well.
Okay, but Brad, are you suggesting that 3 days, is that something that can start Tuesday with a tour? Or do we need the documentation before we do the tour?
I would recommend waiting and get the documentation. If you just want to do a standard tour, you could do that as a group without me next week. But my preference is that we hold off until we've had that introductory day-long sort of a training orientation and as a group, and we kind of do some problem solving as how we're going to go about our assessment.
Well, let me suggest this to the task force. I think that based upon it, again, and I think that I'm hearing agreement upon what you're saying, but I think that people are looking at next week to be able to see some things accomplished. Number one, the COVID testing. Number two, the health department inspection and or documentation as to when it was last inspected. But number three, and probably number three should be number one, just us an opportunity to walk through the facility so that families, as was indicated, will know your family members are safe. We've been able to look at the facility. There's not water on the floor. There's not this, there's not that. And I think that people need to to understand that that's taking place, and I don't think we don't need a training to do that. We just basically just need to put eyes on individuals, and I guess those were the three things that we were looking at maybe for immediate, that is not contrary to what you're suggesting.
Yep, that's great. If they want to get that tour out of the way next week, that'd be great.
Can I just again, from every time I've done a tour, which I've done with the work house, all some groups are gonna tell you is that they were forced to clean everything prior to us coming up. So that's why I started doing tours, just walked up to them coming in. Because I don't care if we do that a week from now, a month from now, a year from now. If it's a planned tour, if we say, okay, on this day, at this time, we're gonna be here. Even if it's perfect, we can walk up right now, that's what I suggest, that we do it without an appointment, because.
And we should do it today.
Well,
the tour was scheduled today, too.
the only reason I say that is schedule a tour and nobody will believe the tour. They will all say, oh yeah, let's clean up now, but last week it wasn't, or next week it won't be.
You can tell.
I've done unscheduled tours and I find everything to be actually in really good shape. I got pictures.
Well, let me ask you this, Brad, let's do this. If you would go ahead and conclude your part of it, and then once we do that, then we can go ahead and take a tour and agree that we're going to, first of all, if you finish, we agree when we're going to meet again as a group, and then we take a tour in that order. If nobody. Because that was on the agenda anyway, the tour was on the agenda.
So what I would like to do is schedule a meeting for, just me and then do it over. Schedule a meeting.
Can we do it in the order though that I suggested, Mr. Alderman? Number one, let Brad finish, schedule a meeting, as you indicated,
Well,
and then make a decision about the tour.
well, this isn't even about the tour. This is about, going back to what Ian Walker was saying. I think that if we can schedule a meeting for Tuesday, giving Commissioner Glass the time to tell us if it's possible, then I think we need to schedule a day next week that we COVID test everybody. I think that the Public Safety Committee, we can actually mandate or put something together that says you have to actually have, at least during this, over the next 12 months, that someone from the health department has to come in and do a weekly inspection or even a bi-weekly inspection and report back to this committee or to the Public Safety Committee, how we all do it. It to me seems, I agree with what she's saying, there's a real sense of urgency. So I think the COVID test should be next week if we can do it. If the availability, can't lie.
Why don't we,
Scheduled tours will only come up with, because we've already done them, and I've already been, keep in mind, at this meeting a bunch. And what they say every time is, well, yeah, of course, now you punished all the people in here because now they made them stay up all night and clean the place. So that when you went through there, everything was made perfect for you. And then you've actually disrupted the whole system and you've been actually punishing the detainees by scheduling a tour. I'm just telling you, I've been down there a bunch. I think Pam has the right idea. I think the COVID test, if it's possible, and I think we should get an answer by Tuesday. I think we schedule a date and we make them results available, not by person, but by numbers. And I think we have the health inspector come in, and I think if they don't commit to it through ENA, then we can actually schedule a public safety meeting next week and put something together and ask for more, at least through the COVID epidemic, that health inspectors. That should address everybody's fears about the water, the heat, the food, and all that. And I do agree there's a sense of urgency and we should not wait 2 or 3 weeks. And I also don't think scheduled tours do anything. The last time I was at the workhouse, I did my own tour. I went down the basement, I took pictures. We actually, me and John Muhammad went in and we talked to the inmates that were there. But We did our own thing. We just simply showed up.
Duly noted. Brad?
Well, I don't necessarily totally disagree, but the fact of the matter is we're going to have to do some on-site assessment, and the jail staff are going to need to prepare and have escorts for us. So you're not going to get completely away from some notice. We are going to have to go on site if we're going to do a full assessment. So that is going to include tours if we're going to do our due diligence. As far as the COVID testing and dictating what you want to do already, like I said, I think we've got a public health expert at the table. Let her work with the jail to find out what they're doing and then come back with a recommendation. That can be as early as Tuesday. If she wants to spend time between now and then, finding out what they're doing and making a recommendation, again, based on CDC guidelines and what's out there for correctional facilities to do. Those guidelines already exist. But if we're not following those, we can make that recommendation based on the public health expert. But I wouldn't say we're going to dictate from the little bit of a presentation we've had today. We shouldn't be dictating changes.
No, and we're not, and I think you're right. I think Pam has made that recommendation as far as COVID, and I think she's gonna follow through on that. So I think we're on the same page with that. So the question becomes,
Yeah, I mean, I just said, and I agree with her, but, you know, it brings up another, here's where I'm talking with you, Mr. Chairman, when we talk about the water and stuff like that. And so the press, I'm assuming the press is halfway right sometimes. So the press reports that, we hear about the water being off and this and that. Then I sit up and I read, and next thing I hear is that, well, the toilet overflowing. Then I hear, and everybody says no. Then I hear in the press, and maybe you can help me, that the correction facility says, oh, well, yeah, but what happened was because of this, we had to shut the water off to fix that. And so the issue about water, if, and I don't know how we verify, I mean, maybe we need to verify that, but if something happened when they had to turn the water off, if that is the fact, then when prisoners said they didn't have water, then the two facts it's a fact. Now, whether that was done with punishment or there was a real reason why the water had to be turned off, maybe that's the question we can look at, but I think it's already been said that I think it's been reported in the press that you all had to turn the water off and the toilet was overflowing because of something happened, and I think that's been reported. I guess it's true. I mean,
the report indicated that the water was turned off because allegedly the inmates stopped at the toilets in order and caused the flooding. In order to stop the flooding, you had to turn off the water. That was what was reported.
you want me to respond?
Yeah.
Great point.
Okay, so, when the events, there were three separate events. When the events happened, inmates, detainees that were taking the event sign flooded their toilets. And so we had to shut off the water to address that issue. And then when we turned back on, they did it again. So then we scheduled, hey, can't keep doing this. Here's the schedule for when we're going to turn the water on for your use. When we move past you flooding, we're back to normal, no water off. And that happened for all of them. They stopped, water was on. There was an event Monday. They were doing repairs in one of the units, replacing toilets. And they shut off the water to do that. Then when they were replacing the toilets, the water they thought was shut off was not working properly, and it wouldn't go any further, but it wasn't shut off. Water was on the floor. We caused it. The detainees thought we were retaliating against them, and they started flooding. So we had water everywhere. We called in a contractor, and you can verify that because there's a bill. And they were there till about 8:30, 9 o'clock that night before they got it all fixed. And we were in the morning cleaning up water because they were flooding. And I had my classification staff, even it was an issue for my classification staff. I had my classification staff go into that unit and say, look, we were not messing with you. We had a problem with plumbing. Stop flooding, let us clean up, fix it. And that's exactly what happened.
And so, Mr. Chairman, I'm getting at, if what he's saying is documented internally. and they can provide that documentation. I think the public wants us to see that and say, here's what he says. This is the evidence of documentation he provided to back that up. And I think we are then able to make sure that the press, anybody else understands that these are the set of facts, and that's what they are. And I think that's one of the things folks are gonna be looking for us to do is to, based on what he just described, to verify whether that is factual or not, to the best of our ability.
To reconcile to the best of our ability, both sides of the story.
And I'm glad you said that, because I had no idea, we got emails from parents emailing us or relatives of detainees saying, hey, we don't have any water. And so,
Why were they flooding? I mean, why were they putting tissue things and stuff?
Yeah, t-shirts.
Why were they doing that?
They were still mad.
Oh, it's okay. They
The
still
ones they
protest.
moved over.
Okay.
Yeah, we moved over there. They were still mad.
and and you said that you notified them that the water will be off and be on the lead period so they can use water. And how do you get that notice out?
My staff go in and talk to them.
So it's verbal.
Yeah, we tell them, hey, here's what's going on. Until we can get this cleaned up and you guys stop flooding, we're gonna turn the water on for your use during this interval. So you know you got water coming. And then when you stop, we turn the water on like it is all the time. And it worked. They stopped. We did. We did what we said. And it was fine. And my superintendent can give you best facts on his unit or his facility, but I think that that's all the blame we had there until we messed up trying to fix something.
I want to try to get to the end, the 2 hour end. I'm going to do a recount of where we are, Brad. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I'm good.
All right, so just as a recap, we're requesting the data. We'll do a data request based upon the request that Mr. Pruitt submitted, and what you typically do as a consultant, we'll determine when we're going to do the tour. The COVID testing, we're requesting to be done immediately, hopefully by next week. Health department inspection, we're going to follow up to see when the last one was done, and to make that request. Public safety chairperson has indicated that if we need an ordinance to get that done on a more regular basis during COVID, that can be done. You'll look at setting up a meeting with the court officials so that we can review the timeline as far as people going to court, facilitate the public, the listening session, and or people submitting documentation or evidence in writing versus the Zoom listening session. We'll contact the mayor about the possibility or request about adding representation from ex-offenders. We'll follow up on that. Make a request. We need to make a request to public services. They need to give us a more definitive answer on those locks, and when those locks will be available and when that's going to get done. I mean, that's a safety issue for both detainees and staff as well. And then I guess, Brad, the plan of action that you're going to help us to determine as far as, where do we go from here? The process. You're developing the process. And so you're going to have to let us know that 3 days. We'll survey the task force to find out how we do those 3 days, what should take place within those 3 days, and what did I miss?
You missed the videos.
Oh, and the video. Well, I think that's
a video watch
data,
for
that's
us.
a data request.
That's internal. That's for us.
Right. That's Yeah, that's the video, but that's in the data request that I think Mr. Pruitt, I know that we discussed.
Not in there.
Okay,
It wasn't in there.
It wasn't there.
it wasn't, okay.
Not in
So Brad, the video, that we're requesting the video so that we can kind of see what happened that day as much as we can.
Sure, we'll make that part of the data request.
But I think we're talking about the three, are we talking about the three video, the three incidents, not just the last one? We talking about the three?
Yeah. No, we're talking about videos, just looking at the videos leading up to, the
You're talking about
incident.
the last, the
Right.
last incident, she wants to see what it can start at 2 a.m.
Right,
So you want to see it before 2 a.m. all the way up until it's done, right?
To the camera.
Right.
right.
Is
We
that,
want to be able to see it until we can't see it anymore.
Yeah, I want to be able to see, you're talking about that day.
No, I was asking you, I was trying to clarify. I understood initially.
I'm talking about the week leading up to.
oh, the week?
The understanding is that there were three different incidents. That's my understanding. And that the last one was a culmination of. Now, that could be right, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's the accusation, is that there were three incidents. But the last one was the uprising, the other one, because if one of the accusations is 3 to 57, well, the 57 was not that day, the 57 was the subsequent day. So that's all I'm saying is that I'm trying to understand the three incidents, or the two that led up to the last. Does that make sense? So whatever, I guess that's what we're at.
Yeah.
I just,
And it
I'm
may,
gonna try to cooperate any way I can, and I'll answer all the questions. You know, when you're looking at a week of videotape, that's a lot. I don't know even how to accomplish that. But, there may be a way to get at what you're looking at. So I'll provide you with what's available.
Not me, the group.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't need you. I'll provide what's available to the group, and then the group can direct.
and based upon the testimony that we received prior, we may not want to look at the video until after we've reviewed some other things, so that we're able to kind of, say, no, we're not talking about 24 hours, we're talking about these 2 hours, or these 2 hours. So that's what we're looking at. So just to know that that video is available based upon whatever information, and then we'll be able to.
And I'll commit to looking over what has been submitted on their COVID processes and see if I can't benchmark that against CDC recommendations. I know New York does an excellent job. I'll see what they have in place. Just as a comparison.
And in the public safety
Speaking of-
committee, we have the chair and the vice chair here. I like the fact that Committeeman Alderman Vaccaro said that we can put together an ordinance that would mandate the health inspections on a more regular basis. Then let's not wait for that. If that's something that can be done, I think that what it does, it helps the folk out there who want to make sure. And if it's just a matter of the ordinance or that direction.
They're out of session, right?
I don't know, I just asked. That's the question. I know, because I'm just.
So, right? The action to it, if we're gonna have the three additional meetings, which are main goals for groups, and we were gonna have as soon as we get the shut stuff. What we could do right away, even next week, is a public safety committee and, more or less a resolution. Sending to the mayor's office. Public safety, will be my job. But we can also, in partners put together, so it's in place. Because I do believe we're going to have at least 4 more people.
So do you really have to do an ordinance in order to just make a recommendation?
Oh, yeah,
I'm asking
I think
that.
the health director would agree to whatever we ask.
Yeah, right.
I really do. I think,
Yeah.
he wants this.
I don't think
I'm
that,
just volunteering that, the public safety.
I'm sorry. Because I just wasn't sure, what the process.
I'm a policy guy. I just would rather the department do it.
Right.
If they don't want to do it, that's
When you
the
go.
ordinances.
So,
But I appreciate what the chairman, was offering. It's just that it's so much uncertainty about having any additional board of alder meetings, before April 19th, that the fastest way to get it done is just get a commitment from the health.
That's right.
Which seems to be a pretty easy guy to get along with.
Well, I think that's great, but I don't think we have an ordinance ready to go.
Yeah.
And then we're saying the attorney-
And then we're gonna.
in closing out, as you all know, there's gonna be a lot of, media that is gonna wanna talk to many of us. I think that there needs to be a designated spokesperson for this task force. I don't think that all of us should be all over the place talking. I think there needs to be a organized, that, one person to be able to talk to the media.
I agree. I nominate the chairman.
I think that the fact that we've gone over our to-do list, if anything has to be said, it's just that, we've met, we've had an opportunity to meet with the commissioner, to ask some general questions. We've asked for certain information. We're working over the next couple of days on to get that information, to be able to review it, do something, and just, that's it.
Well, they listen to you now, so you probably gave them what
There
they
you go. So
needed.
now you know. There you go. So now you got to
No, but you bring up a good point, though. Okay, I think we should officially nominate somebody as a spokesperson so that. But did we vote on it?
No, we didn't.
Did we vote on it? I made a recommendation. By acclamation, good.
Alderman Boyd, I did put in my notes, how do we make decisions by consensus or, and it seems so far we've been, with this group, we've been able to. I think it's been a productive 2 hours. I will ask this at the end. I think that there were a couple of things, Brian, that Mr. Pruitt had in his recommendations that I guess you'll follow up on. Can we have a portal on the city's website for documents, minutes to be housed? Can we have an email account established to receive information from the public? And those two things, I guess, can we receive the written, we've already talked about that. But those two things I would suspect would fall under the preview of the mayor's office or public safety. So.
Let me see what I can find out.
Okay.
So Brian, were you taking the minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
on that, Brian, now, this your last day in the public safety office,
This is
right?
the
So
last day.
we won't see you again next week. Is that
No,
correct?
we'll be continuing with the task force.
Oh, good, okay.
I'm gonna say, no, they didn't.
Well, the reason I know is because I'm the chairman of the property subcommittee, and we were relying on Brian to give us information, but he's getting, I think, a promotion to go to the city council's office. So that's what I want to confirm, so. we still have him on board. Awesome.
So Brad has indicated, Brad's gonna work out the 3 days, but do we want to meet on Tuesday via Zoom to follow up on where we are? There may be questions concerning any particular time you want to stick with 2 o'clock? 2 o'clock Tuesday?
Just send a notice out.
So everybody with 2 o'clock? Tuesday?
That's via Zoom.
Yeah.
All right.
Do we want to do Zoom or do we want to try to?
So that's fine. It's easier.
All right, then. With that, Brad, did you have anything before we close out?
No, I appreciate everybody's time and I'm looking forward to working with you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, we
Well,
have.
I'm a multicultural, multi-faith, spiritual prayer person, so.
God comes in all forms.
So we'll just ask everybody to reflect in their own way. How's that? We'll just ask everybody as they bow, if you just reflect and meditate in your own way. We understand that people have many different beliefs, and we respect all of those beliefs. We just ask that the energy here would be productive. We would ask that people would always be mindful that we're doing this for the sake of others and in service of others. And we are thankful for those who have gathered and who have accepted the call to serve. As we leave this place, we pray that everything that is positive is working for us, and we look forward to meeting again. We submit this prayer in the name of all that is holy. Amen. Ooh, that was my generic prayer. We're adjourned.
I got two. I got, they good.